welcome to American Catholic History. If you like our podcast, be sure to rate us and give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Noelle Heaster-Crow.
And I'm Tom Crow.
Today we've got something of an oddity, an episode about American Catholic history, but we don't actually talk about a single Catholic person or event here in the United States.
Yes, instead, we're talking about a rather fascinating bit of anti-Catholicism that happened in the colonies, even though there were no Catholics around to protest against it.
Our topic is Pope Night, the annual night of bonfires, boozing, and brawling that had a thick anti-Catholic theme. It lasted in the colonies from 1632 until just before the American Revolution, and it happened every year on November 5th.
Indeed. Remember, the 5th of November. Pope Night was the American colonial version of Fawkes Night, which took place over in Britain. Fawkes Night was certainly an annual anti-Catholic event, but it was also a night when those in the lower tiers of society took the liberty of acting like perfect hoodlums to let the upper echelons know what they really thought about the societal structure.
And the folks in the upper echelons tolerated it, since it was, at root, an anti-Catholic demonstration. But they also put up with it because it was one concentrated night in which the lower classes could get out their frustrations and then go on with life. The alternative, of course, was ongoing unrest, which might mean changes to the social structure. The upper crust certainly didn't want that.
No, of course not. So let's start with more details on what Fawkes Night was and where it came from. Fawkes Night, as I said, was the annual commemoration of the day in 1605.
On November 5th?
Yes, November 5th, when a Catholic revolutionary named Guy Fawkes, that's Fawkes, not Fox, was caught guarding a massive store of gunpowder in the cellar beneath the English Parliament building. The gunpowder was meant to blow up the House of Lords and King James I, who was a Protestant, the next day. The goal of the revolutionaries was to replace James with a Catholic. The whole affair became known as the Gunpowder Plot, and Guy Fawkes the most well-known of the conspirators. The annual remembrance of the unrealized explosion came to be known as Fawkes Night.
Also, the name Guy Fawkes mask may ring a bell for some. Those are the white masks with the absurd, somewhat disturbing grin, thin mustache, narrow beard, rosy cheeks, and straight black hair. They were designed by the author of the graphic novel V for Vendetta and were used in the 2005 movie based on the book.
Yeah, and then these masks were used by the folks in the videos put out by the Anonymous movement, who was also an anti-establishment and into leaking sensitive information.
The name Guy Fawkes was used for the masks because of the anti-establishment connection, of course. The original Fawkes wanted to blow up Parliament and kill the king. These other folks wanted to bring down what they saw as corrupt governments in their own places and times.
But, unlike those guys, Fawkes was Catholic, as were his co-conspirators. They intended to restore the Catholic throne of England, so the annual Guy Fawkes Night revelries and raucousness were decidedly anti-Catholic.
Yeah, and they had a little rhyme that went with them.
Yes, remember, the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Guy Fawkes and his companions did the scheming contrive to blow the king and parliament all up alive.
Now, there were different versions, and many versions included plenty that was anti-popish language. The festivities on Guy Fawkes Night included burning an effigy of Fawkes and of the Pope. Well, it didn't take long for this tradition to jump the pond, as they say, and it did so with the sailors.
Right, because sailors would cross the broad Atlantic between Britannia and the American colonies with some frequency, while over there, on the old sod, they would have picked up the tradition, and whether or not the sailors were themselves anti-Catholic, they wouldn't miss a reason to get rowdy and cause some mischief.
No. Also, since sailors generally came from the lower levels of society, they also loved an excuse to give vent to their frustrations with society.
The first Pope Night in the colonies was on November 5th, 1632, in Plymouth, Massachusetts. There were no effigies of the Pope nor of Guy Fawkes, but sailors just lit a massive bonfire and got riotously drunk. The fire got out of hand and burned down several nearby houses.
You know.
It happens.
The following year, sailors in a few other coastal New England towns decided that must have been a heck of a lot of fun. So they had their own night of riotous drinking and their own big bonfires. Over the years, the practice spread up and down the coast of New England. And the local authorities didn't sanction these nights of destruction, but they were mostly powerless to stop it.
Well, there were other elements that influenced the vigor, or lack thereof, with which the authorities tried to stop the revelry. For one, in New England, the Puritans were still in charge.
Yes, and while Puritans disliked the drunken, riotous behavior, they disliked Catholics more. So they were torn, and, well, they happened to let that anti-Catholicism win.
Yeah, I can hear it. They'd be like Willy Wonka trying to stop Mike TV from getting into the TV machine. Don't stop, come back.
Very vigorous. But also the Puritans were they're really crazy about their anti-Catholicism. I mean, they had outlawed Christmas.
They outlawed Christmas?
Yeah, they outlawed Christmas as being too Catholic. So they weren't going to stop the night of drunken revelry that also was very anti-Catholic.
Yeah, that's quite the obsession. Anyhow, so the festivities grew and began to include a parade with an effigy of the Pope plus an effigy of the devil, naturally. At some point in the early 1700s, another effigy joined the parade, that of the Old Pretender.
And the Old Pretender was?
Well, in 1688, the last Catholic king of England, James II, was deposed by his Protestant daughter, Mary, and her Protestant husband, William of Orange. Parliament had invited William and Mary to invade and depose James II because they feared James would try to make England Catholic again. James died in 1701, and his son, James Francis, who was Mary's younger half-brother, but who was Catholic, would have succeeded him as James III. Many Catholics hoped he would invade to reclaim the throne. For his part, James continued to hold himself as the rightful king of England, quite reasonably. This, however, prompted English Protestants to call him the Old Pretender.
So including the Old Pretender was one additional jab at the Catholics, and this one was not just religious, but explicitly political.
Right.
But then, the irony, sort of, is that William and Mary died without an heir, so Mary's younger sister Anne became Queen of England, and then she died without an heir in 1714. At that point, even though James was still alive with the strongest of claims to the throne, Parliament reached out to George, the Elector of Hanover, to be King of England.
Of course. George was something like the 54th person in line of succession to be king. He was a second cousin to Mary, Anne, and James. He had never even been in England. He didn't care about England, but that didn't matter. He was Protestant, which was what mattered.
Yeah, and that's serious dedication to anti-Catholicism among the ruling class.
Of course.
And that showed itself in Guy Fawkes Night in Britain and in Pope's Night here in America.
Yes, by this time, Pope's Night in America had evolved into this big-time event where lots of the lower classes would really let her rip for one night, drinking way too much and really letting out their frustrations on the upper classes. They would go around with their elaborate wagons with the effigies on them, sometimes with men dancing around the effigies while dressed in clothes that had been tarred and feathered. They'd harass the upper classes at their houses, breaking windows, waking them up, and demanding some sort of payment to prevent them doing even more damage. The whole macabre procession would wind its way through the streets, causing mayhem and stealing barrels and chairs and anything wooden on the way to the site of the bonfire, where the party would reach its unholy zenith.
But the place where the event really hit its stride was Boston.
Naturally.
Of course. I mean, in Boston, we do things big, right? In Boston, they weren't content with just one parade. No, they had two. Bigger town, more people to involve. Two rival gangs split the city in two, north and south. A split that, well, really hasn't gone away. They both carried on as described above, and they both wound their way through the town, causing difficulty until they came upon each other, and then it was on.
On like Donkey Kong.
Right. The two gangs got into an all-out brawl. In some years, folks actually died in the melee. Whichever gang won, and it's not clear what winning means in this one.
Maybe a handful were still able to walk away?
Probably, something like that. But whichever side won the fight was entitled to leave the field of battle with both their own wagon turned stage, as well as the other side's wagon. Then they'd both take stages to their own home base where they'd light both on fire and commence with all the night of debauchery.
Yes. Localities, including Boston, passed laws to rein it all in, but the laws were largely useless. The constables and other officers of the law were simply outnumbered, or they approved, and their efforts to enforce the law were, lackluster.
Plus, as discussed, since the event was, at least on its surface, an explicit affront to the Pope, the upper crust was willing to tolerate it.
So this all continued well into the 18th century, and then it took on a more political overtone when the British went to war against the French, who were, of course, Catholic. This was the 7 Years' War of 1756 to 1763, or the French and Indian War, as we call it here in America. The results of this war was Britain gaining control over the French colonies in Canada, which were largely Catholic.
And then a few curious things happened, followed by a rather remarkable thing.
The curious thing happened in 1765 and then in 1774.
In 1765, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act, an effort to raise money to pay for the 7 Years' War. Since a good portion of that war had been fought on the North American continent, they reasoned that the American colonists should pay for it.
But that didn't sit well with the American colonists.
No.
The warm feelings toward Mother England turned cold, and they did so quickly in 1765. The leaders of Boston's North and South mobs actually brought their gangs together to hold joint protests against the British. There was no Pope Night that year, and the tradition largely died out, at least in Boston.
But it didn't stay dead. It just morphed. In 1774, the next curious thing happened. The British Parliament realized that they needed to pacify the Catholic subjects in Canada, lest they rise up to be their own entity or try to rejoin France. So Parliament passed the Quebec Act. We talked about the Quebec Act before when we discussed how Ben Franklin helped choose John Carroll to be the first bishop of Baltimore. The Quebec Act gave the Catholics of Canada a lot of religious liberties which had been suppressed after Quebec became a British territory.
Naturally, the British Parliament didn't do this because they suddenly had warm feelings for Catholics. But as far as they were concerned, since those Catholics were way over there across the ocean, so long as they just paid their taxes and didn't cause trouble, or joined in the trouble that was beginning to brew in the American colonies to their south, then that was fine. They could jolly well keep on being Catholic.
But the colonists in New England didn't share that pragmatic view. Those newly liberated Catholics were right next door. To them, the British Parliament suddenly granting such rights to Catholics was an affront to their British Protestant ethic. Pope's Night was back in vogue, but this time it included significant anti-British fervor, since the British were now seen basically as friends of Catholicism. For a year or two, Pope's Night recommenced.
But it all ended with the outbreak of the War for Independence, and frankly, it ended for similar pragmatic reasons as why the British Parliament had passed the Quebec Act. When the war started in Massachusetts and the 13 American colonies ratified the Declaration of Independence, suddenly the Americans wanted the Canadians to join them in their cause of casting off the British yoke.
This effort to win Canadian support was what prompted Ben Franklin, Charles Carroll, Samuel Chase, and Father John Carroll to travel to Quebec City. We discussed this in a previous episode.
And back home, the case for being nice with Catholics was pressed by none other than General George Washington. Washington had an interesting relationship with Catholics, which we've talked about at length in other places. Washington was Anglican, of course, and a Freemason, but he elevated and relied heavily upon Catholics throughout the Revolution. He had a very friendly relations with the Carrolls and other prominent Catholics, and he supported the construction of the first Catholic parish in Virginia. The evidence is strong that he actually died Catholic. Again, we've talked about all that in other episodes.
But for the purpose of this episode, he was also a consummate statesman, diplomat, and general who was trying to defeat the most powerful military on earth in a rebellion. He knew that he would need at least some Catholics to be on his side, so that meant not treating Catholics like second-class citizens at best.
Yes, so in 1775, he wrote a letter and said of Pope's Night, quote, "As the commander-in-chief has been apprised of a design formed for the observance of that ridiculous and childish custom of burning the effigy of the Pope, he cannot help expressing his surprise that there should be officers and soldiers in this army so void of common sense as not to see the impropriety of such a step at this juncture, at a time when we are soliciting and have really obtained the friendship and alliance of the people of Canada, whom we ought to consider as brethren embarked in the same cause. The defense of the general liberty of America, at such a juncture and in such circumstances, to be insulting their religion is so monstrous as not to be suffered or excused. Indeed, instead of offering the most remote insult, it is our duty to address public thanks to these our brethren, as to them we are so much indebted for every late happy success over the common enemy in Canada.
And that rather pointed and expressive letter was enough. Pope's Night, 1775, was short-circuited, and though there was another attempt at doing it up in 1776, it never really fully happened again.
Such was the power of George Washington's word and example.
Now, we know that anti-Catholic activity, even violence, continued in the United States for many years. It's actually never really fully died away. But this relic of our British roots, this one intense night of anti-Catholic violence, did die. It died as this new nation, one founded with religious liberty at its foundation, was born. You've been listening to American Catholic History. If you've been enjoying our podcast, please help us by giving us a 5-star rating and a good review. To learn more about Pope's Night, to find previous episodes, or learn about our upcoming pilgrimages to, we're going to be doing one soon to the Kentucky Holy Land and Bourbon Country. Please visit our website, americancatholichistory.org.
We also love feedback and hearing about cool Catholic history sites and stories from all over. You can email us at, what is it again?
Feedback at American Catholic History.
I got it. You can email us at feedback@americancatholichistory.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/AmericanCatholicHistory, on Instagram at ACH_podcast, and on X at ACH1513.
Thank you once again for Thank you once again for listening. I'm Noelle Heaster-Crow.
And I'm Tom Crow. See you next time on American Catholic History.
There we go. It's something. Whatever it is.